It is my great pleasure to introduce Dean Eric Schwartz. Dean Schwartz graduated from Binghamton University with a bachelor's degree in political science. He earned a law degree from New York University and a master's degree in public affairs from Princeton University. Currently Dean of the Hubert H. Humphrey School of Public Affairs at the University of Minnesota, he has held numerous high-level positions with the United Nations, the United States government, and philanthropic and non-governmental organizations. During his distinguished career in public service, Dean Schwartz has served at the National Security Council, the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva, as UN Deputy Special Envoy for Tsunami Recovery, and U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration. Dean Schwartz received the Edward Weisband Distinguished Alumnus Award for Public Service or Contribution to Public Affairs from the Binghamton University Alumni Association in 1999, and just last night was awarded an Honorary Doctor of Laws degree from Binghamton University. Congratulations, and thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Many thanks, Dean Bronstein, President Stenger, Provost Neiman, faculty, other deans, and my warmest congratulations to all of the graduates and to all of the families of the graduates. What a wonderful occasion. I also have to, in advance, apologize. When I finish my remarks this afternoon, I will depart the stage and miss the rest of the ceremony because I myself have to preside over a graduation ceremony tomorrow in Minneapolis. And if you've ever tried to travel from one of the coldest parts of the country to one of the more rainy parts of the country, whether in Minneapolis and Binghamton, whether in the winter, the spring, or the summer, it's always a little bit chancy. And one thing a dean can't do is miss his own school's graduation. So if you'll accept my apologies. I am indeed a proud graduate of Binghamton University, class of 1979. My years at Binghamton were among the most important of my life. I arrived in the fall of 1975, some 39 years ago, with only the most general sense that I wanted to have a career in public life. And the academic experiences, the mentoring, and the opportunity to explore possible career options were critical to my own growth and my development intellectually, socially, and ethically. And were also critical to the sharpening of my own focus and my own goals. I think often and reflect back on the life lessons I learned here. As I mentioned yesterday, when I was so humbled and moved by the university's presentation to me of an honorary degree, I am grateful that I had the opportunity to have so many important mentors here, professors. One is sitting behind us, Professor Al Voss. He taught me Shakespeare. And I took Shakespeare, I think, in 1976, and for the rest of my life, whether in serious conversations or cocktail party conversations, people actually thought I knew something about Shakespeare because we read 9 plays in that course, and actually I did. So thank you, Professor Voss. The opportunity to be a student of a professor like Edward Weisband, who spent so many years here in the Department of Political Science, so responsible for inspiring me toward a life of foreign affairs, international relations, human rights, and humanitarianism. A mentor whom I still seek out for advice and assistance. I'm thankful, as I said yesterday, for my friendship with another professor, David Cingranelli, who was a freshly minted assistant professor at Binghamton in 1970, I don't remember, who taught me about Congress and now plays such a critical role in educating students on international human rights. So I can't tell you how great it is to be back. And I encourage you in the future to come back. Even if you have to travel from the upper Midwest of the United States under uncertain weather conditions. So let me begin my 10 to 12 minutes of remarks by thanking you, the students at the School of Community and Public Affairs, just as I will thank my own students at the Hubert H. Humphrey School of Public Affairs tomorrow when they graduate. Let me thank you for your commitment to public life. To be sure, your interests are many and varied. Whether you ultimately aspire to be a social worker, a state legislator, a city planner, a director of student services, a congressperson, a community organizer, an immigration advocate, an activist of another kind, or even President of the United States. While your goals are certainly diverse, you are united in your broad objective of engagement in professions where your principal task in one way or another will be no less ambitious than to make the world a better place. What a noble ambition, which you honor by the degree that you receive today, a degree that will help give you the tools to promote the common good in our increasingly diverse world. As a parent of two daughters, one in college and another about to begin that adventure, I appreciate, now I think I need to look at the parents, I appreciate how foolish it is to take too much credit for your children's successes or too much blame for the challenges and indeed occasional failures that they might experience. But all of the parents here today, all of the family members, all of the friends, can take great pride in the simple fact that your daughter or your son or your nephew or your niece or your grandchild or your friend is equipping herself or himself for a career in service to others. As the Dean of the Humphrey School of Public Affairs, it's hard for me not to consider the value of that objective of promoting the common good in light of the fact that this is the 50th anniversary year of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, a law that did more to end segregation in the United States than any legislative measure in our nation's history, and an act that my school's namesake, Hubert Humphrey, regarded as a crowning achievement in his political career. At a time of considerable cynicism, about public life, including a flight toward the dangerous myth that the simple, the unequivocal, and the collective pursuit of private interest is the best way to ensure broad prosperity and progress, we do well to remember the critical contributions of individuals and institutions, non-governmental and governmental, committed to advancing the human condition. That Civil Rights Act of 1964, it not only struck the major blow against segregation, but it laid the groundwork for ending horrific abuses against African Americans, as well as the climate of impunity that was pervasive in many parts of our country. That act would not have been possible without the broad social movement that gave rise to a 1963 March on Washington for jobs and freedom, nor would it have come about without the appreciation among politicians and among the American people of the role of government in promoting justice. So standing here before you today, what words of advice, what guidance might I offer based on my own experiences in government, at the UN, in the NGO community, and further informed by the social movement and the policy actions that brought rise to the Civil Rights Act of 1964? First, and perhaps most obvious, remind yourself every day that the tools, the skills you have taken from this College of Community and Public Affairs are important because they will be used in service of the underlying value of promoting the common good. With your education, you may indeed end up as a policy wonk of one sort or another. And for the parents out there unfamiliar with the term, dictionary.com defines wonk as a person who studies a subject or an issue in an excessively assiduous and thorough manner. There's nothing wrong with that. That's how you should study issues. But to borrow a phrase from a colleague of mine at the Humphrey School, you want to be a wonk with soul, which is the only kind of wonk to be. Second, with your knowledge, informed by the values that put you here in the first place. Don't worry too much about being presumptuous. In discussions and debates in the institutions where you end up working, be prepared to think big. Offer your perspectives respectfully and carefully, but don't be afraid to be bold. Look, with dramatic economic disparities throughout our country, with climate change threatening our future, with political gridlock in Washington, the fact is that the folks in charge in Washington, in the states, in localities throughout the country, they're not running the world with the greatest degree of effectiveness, you may have noticed. So step in and don't miss the chance to act on a critical opportunity or promote a response to a critical threat that you see, but which may be being missed by others. Whether that's a gap in a social program here in Binghamton, or a potential genocide in a place like Rwanda. In short, if I may borrow a phrase from our own commencement speaker at the Humphrey School last year, Vice President Biden's National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, don't feel obliged to wait your turn. If you don't act, it may be the case that nobody will. And let me illustrate this point. And I'm going to go back to Hubert Humphrey with your indulgence and forgiveness. After all, the school I run is named for the guy. Let me illustrate it by an example. In 1948, as the 37-year-old mayor of Minneapolis, 37, Hubert Humphrey pressed for a strong statement at the Democratic National Convention affirming civil rights, a proposal that threatened to create a political controversy because its sponsors had the temerity to call for laws against lynching, against mob killing by the hanging of African Americans, and also to call for an end to school segregation and to job discrimination. In a landmark speech at that convention, Humphrey addressed the convention and said, and I quote, "To those who say this civil rights program is an infringement on states' rights, I say this: the time has arrived in America for the Democratic Party to get out of the shadow of states' rights and walk forthrightly into the bright sunshine of human rights." And indeed, the convention accepted the civil rights plank, which was followed by a walkout from the convention by Southern Democrats. That remarkable presentation, however, set in motion events that ultimately led to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Was the speech of Hubert Humphrey, a 37-year-old mayor who in fact had received his master's degree only 8 years before the convention, Was that speech presumptuous? Many clearly felt that it was. But of course, it wasn't. It was an act of empowered agency by a young man who was prepared to identify an opportunity for leadership and to seize it. And you all should leave this institution with that same sense of agency. But to do so effectively, I believe you need to take on a few additional lessons. First, treat your adversaries with respect and civility. As terribly wrong as they may be on critical issues that impact the well-being of many people, and of course, I tend to think my own adversaries are very wrong, your capacity to engage them successfully will have an enormous impact on your success as a program administrator, as a policymaker, as an organizer, or in any profession that you find yourself. Sometimes it's best to take a stand, but sometimes it's best to put yourself in the shoes of another. The Hubert Humphrey, whose speech precipitated a walkout of the Dixiecrats at the 1948 Democratic National Convention, is the very same Hubert Humphrey, or was the very same Hubert Humphrey, who negotiated so carefully and so respectfully with Republican Majority Leader Everett Dirksen in the passage of the Civil Rights Act. Second, on issues that matter deeply to you, be sure that you are the smartest person in the room. Advocacy is important, but it is most effective when it comes on top of a bedrock of information and analysis. And there's the value of being a bit of a wonk. And your training here at Binghamton, I'm sure, has underscored the importance of that to you. And third, and finally, realize each and every day that none of us and no person is an island. You can only achieve great things with the support and engagement of colleagues. So indeed, engage your colleagues, your subordinates and others in dialogue. Lead, but lead collaboratively. Treat people with respect and with deference, and don't miss an opportunity to offer deep expressions of support, appreciation, and kind words to colleagues. Graduates of the College of Community and Public Affairs, my warmest congratulations to you all. Thank you.